My dear friends, in 1974, as architectural plans were being completed for this sanctuary, I was an 11-year-old at the Reform Movement's Camp Coleman in Cleveland, Georgia. For those unable to remember 1974, the Jewish world had gone from immense pride following the Six-Day War in 1967 to fear of Israel's annihilation in the 73 Yom Kippur War. My summer camp counselors, instead of enjoying the mid-70s recreations of the Woodstock generation, chose to connect kids like me to love their Judaism, to love Israel and the Jewish people. And during that summer, Coleman staff conducted a socio-drama that would inspire lawsuits today. So I'm not advocating a return to their mode of programming, but here's what they did that summer after Israel narrowly averted total disaster. My unit head took the microphone during a rousing song session and made the following announcement: Israel has been bombed by surrounding nations. Half the country is gone. The half where most Israelis live in the Tel Aviv corridor has fortunately survived, but Israel's future, kids, is iffy. Before our counselors brought us back to a sense of security and ended the program saying that the bombing information was inaccurate. For an instant, just an instant, the thought of a world without Israel was real. Most have been comparing attacks on Israel since last October 7th to the Yom Kippur War, but Israel's 1948 War of Independence provides a better parallel. Why? Because as we gather on this holiest night of the Jewish year, Israel is surrounded by a radical alliance committed to ending her existence, more like 1948. Israel's most challenging era is clearly now, and I publicly applaud and thank so many members of our congregation and my non-Jewish clergy friends who have been standing up and speaking out about Israel's right to defend herself against terror groups created expressly to kill and maim Israelis. Ever since those 70s summers at camp, I've been a Reform Zionist, which many of you may also be without even realizing it. What does Reform Zionist mean? A Zionist believes in the right of the Jewish people to sovereignty and security in the land of Zion. A Reform Zionist also believes in the Jewish values enumerated in Israel's Declaration of Independence, which includes these words: the state of Israel will be based on freedom, justice, and peace, as envisioned by the prophets of Israel. It will ensure complete equality of social and political rights to all its inhabitants, irrespective of religion, race, or sex. It will guarantee freedom of religion and conscience and language and education and culture. Now, let's admit the obvious. Many who are ideologically committed to Israel resent any criticism of Israel. Abba Eban once joked that an enemy of Israel is someone who only agrees with Israel 98% of the time. Yet just as there are different ways to love America as an American, love is a many-splendored thing when it comes to loving Israel as a Zionist. As a Reform Zionist, for instance, I find the hardening of some other Zionist hearts toward non-Jews deeply saddening and un-Jewish. You can be a staunch Zionist as I am and still have room in your heart to empathize with the tremendous suffering of innocent Palestinians, even if Hamas is to blame. It's just that when you don't have to actually face the unbearable reality for Israelis and Palestinians over there, it's easier to talk about them from our living rooms. A powerful moment for me happened just weeks ago at a small meeting of Memphis faith leaders across zip code, racial, and religious lines. In walk 3 of the 8 Memphis Muslim imams whose mosques I have spoken in for decades. One is a longtime friend who since last October has lost 29 members of his family in his birthplace, Gaza. Even with Hamas accountable for this madness, 29 of my friends' family members, including little children, have been killed, and that pains me as a Jew. Anwar knows that my Israeli relatives are also suffering, and that I have been in deep pain counseling younger Israeli rabbis I mentor. So we just hugged with tears in our eyes because the anguish is so great and seems to have no end. Most of the 7 million Jews living inside Israel have nowhere else to go. But the majority of mainstream Israelis who are more like you and me Jewishly do not wish to permanently occupy the 5 million Palestinians in Gaza and the West Bank combined. I have faith in the IDF, including dearest friends, really family. They're watching, who are serving and defending Israel against Hezbollah in the north, Hamas in the south, terrorists on the West Bank, the other fronts. But the war on Israel's borders we rightly pay attention to is masking another growing uprising from within. And in this war, the real danger lies not in Iran, but in Jewish extremists with unprecedented power, hell-bent on purifying the Jewish state of non-believers. And that ought to be of concern to anyone who loves Israel, especially Jews. As we begin this most inward 24-hour period of the Jewish year, it's the inner condition of our spiritual homeland, literally the soul of Israel, that warrants our attention tonight. And to catch everyone up, the view of these current ultranationalist, Judeo-Messianic leaders in power is that Israel is a Jewish state as they define Jewish. And in a Jewish state as they define it, there is not only no room for Reform Jews, but also no room for non-Jews. This means that when new immigrants from the former Soviet Union arrive, if they can't be confirmed as Jewish by ultra-Orthodox rabbis, these non-kosher migrants must quickly be returned to wherever they came from. The non-Jewish citizens within the borders of Israel, 21% of whom are Arab Israeli citizens, are to be boycotted, discriminated against, provoked. You should avoid cooperating with them or even try to create a life of tolerance alongside them. And regarding the other 3 million Palestinians on the West Bank, you can attack them, destroy their property and livelihood, smash their cars, burn their houses, physically assault them, even kill them. The publicly stated goal of these Jewish nationalists, who do not speak for you or me, is to expel the 3 million West Bank Arabs for the benefit of Messianic Jewish settlers. But even that is not their ultimate goal, because in their eyes, the eyes of these far-right Jewish extremists, this is a holy war. So you are commanded. It is a mitzvah to purify Israeli society of all elements with whom you do not agree, especially anyone willing to consider a territorial compromise or a process that could lead someday to peace between the 7 million Jewish Israelis and the 7 million Palestinians living between the Jordan River and the Mediterranean Sea. I see your faces. This is news to many of you, and I realize these words may seem overblown. Is Israel really that close to a violent clash between Jewish nationalists keeping the current government in power and the rest of Israeli society? The war is masking it, but there is no question that Israel's inner societal crisis is spreading with most American Jews and donors completely unaware. Why? Because more than a few in Memphis and other American Jews who make Israel their number one issue, as I do, rally around the Israel in our hearts, not the current societal reality for Israelis themselves long before October 7th. Over the last 371 days, you may have thought that Israel's undergoing the most tragic period in its history, with heavy casualties, hostages still in Gaza, 80,000 civilians forced to leave their homes in the north, and you wouldn't be wrong. But not all current government ministers feel the same way. Take Cabinet Minister Orit Strock, who told a group of Jewish settlers at a remote outpost in the West Bank that we are living in miraculous times, as she shared publicly the ease with which she and those in power have been able to authorize far-flung settlement building because everyone's eyes have been focused on Gaza and Lebanon. Get this. While nobody was looking, she and the current government managed to seize more land for settlers on the West Bank in the past year than in any year in the past 3 decades. Another extremist, Israel's finance minister, with absolutely no skill in finance, named Smotrich, has not only called for continuing to stay in Gaza, he published a 2017 plan to topple the secular Palestinian Authority in the West Bank in order to provoke a Palestinian uprising, which would thereby force Israel to enter all the West Bank areas currently controlled by Palestinians. For Smotrich followers and his cabinet pal, a self-proclaimed racist minister named Ben Gvir, post-October 7th, has been a heavenly messianic sign from God. Not only to continue the war in Gaza, but to reclaim biblical lands north, south, east, regardless of whoever lives there now. To be clear, this is not official government policy. Prime Minister Netanyahu has repeatedly denied that Israel has any plans to rebuild settlements in Gaza. And it certainly isn't something IDF top brass are looking for. One IDF senior official said, and I quote him, "We are trying to plan how to get Israel out of the worst predicament it's been in on all fronts, but we have government ministers and young extremists who are convinced something wonderful is happening." I began with the question, can you imagine a world without Israel? What about the reverse question? Can you imagine Israel without the world? To hell with the world, say these ultranationalists. They want funding, but they don't care about losing the support of Israel's allies, since they don't like democracy. They also don't travel abroad. They would gladly see Israel isolated from the world if it meant they could do as they wish in the West Bank and Gaza. As everyone prognosticates politically about the day after in Gaza and what entity might rule Gaza once Israel moves out, or how Israel will push back Hezbollah, and it must 13 miles in the north, and do what it must do regarding Iran, few are asking about the day after question inside Israel. And I don't mean the next elections for prime minister. I mean, my friends, the fraying of Israel's social fabric. In Israel already becoming a very different country than the one you visited or attend rallies for or know in your mind. A.D. Gordon founded the Zionist youth movement 100 years ago in 1924. Listen to his words. There will be no victory of light over darkness as long as we do not recognize the simple truth that instead of simply fighting the darkness, we have to intensify the light. The reform movement in Israel is precisely the kind of light Israel needs right now. In case you didn't know, there's a burgeoning indigenous Israel movement for Reform Judaism, known as the IMPJ, with 130 Israeli Reform rabbis and 54 communities, including our sister synagogue outside Tel Aviv, rays of light, key to this day after question to ensure, in the words of Israel's Declaration of Independence, complete equality of religious, social, political rights, guaranteeing freedom of religion, conscience, language, education, and culture. Why am I so up on the IMPJ? Why is it so key? The secular Israelis reached by our 54 Israeli reform communities include high-tech leaders in business, IDF officers, health, education, and research people, the best hope for the day after in Israel. Secular Israelis have been serving and leading units in Gaza all year with barely a break. The army is experiencing shortages since relatively few of the ultra-Orthodox serve. Israel's economy is facing its steepest decline in years, and there is massive public pressure for a ceasefire and hostage deal in Gaza. So among the millions of secular Israelis trying to live modern lives, just like you and me who are watching this, Israelis actually running businesses and companies and with the financial means to leave the country with their families in today's devastating reality. Our Israel reform movement, which the ultra-Orthodox nationalists in government have managed to cut off funding for. Our IMPJ provides the best hope for a healthy society for all Jews and the future of Israeli society. Just days ago, the reputable Khan Israeli polling firm announced that almost a quarter of Israelis are weighing leaving the country. 23% said they've considered leaving temporarily or permanently. 36% of the non-Orthodox secular respondents are more likely to have weighed moving than their so-called religious counterparts. Why? Because they can. The poll found that 24% have checked housing options abroad, 21% have examined job opportunities abroad, 15% have obtained or attempted to get a foreign passport or visa while also checking on education options for their children. I've been devoting late nights and early mornings this past year Zooming with some of our weary 130 Israeli Reform rabbis who directly support hostage families and provide practical aid and counseling to the displaced in the north and south as they continue to fight for the equality and acceptance of all Jews. But my friends, the mission is even bigger than that. Throughout these High Holy Days, in your lap, in the prayer book, we'll read a summary of God's 13 attributes from Exodus, known as the Brit Shlosh Esrei. Think of it as predicate theology, with God as the subject. God is, and then fill in the blank with the words of the Torah, and you'll understand how the reform movement in Israel is spreading these attributes of God societally. Here's the text: a society that is rachum v'chanun, compassionate like God, erech apayim, slow to incite violence, v'rav chesed ve'emet, abounding in kindness, fairness, and truth, Notzer chesed la'alafim, extending kindness to the next generation. Noseh avon va'fesha v'chata'a v'nakeh, admitting accountability, no matter who we are, with a relative pittance of support. This temple and our local Memphis Jewish Federation, JFNA, being exceptions. The IMPJ, our Israel Reform Movement, offers a ray of hope. Oh, and guess where the current leading Israeli Reform rabbi and member of Israel's Knesset, Gilad Kariv, discovered the Jewish values in living form in Israel's Declaration of Independence? Right here, walking into this sanctuary, when temple members Bert and Art Wolf of blessed memory brought him to a temple Israel service when Gilad was in his teens as an Israeli scout. Now, a well-known figure, lawyer, and Reform rabbi in Israel's Knesset, Kariv in the Wall Street Journal last week publicly congratulated the IDF and Prime Minister Netanyahu's government for eliminating one of Israel's greatest enemies and enemies of the entire free world, Hezbollah terrorist leader Hassan Nasrallah. This is noteworthy since Rabbi Kariv is a leading member of the Israeli opposition to Netanyahu. I mentioned Gilad because he echoed the point I am raising with you tonight, that Israel must have an inner destination because, as Gilad put it, if the country doesn't know where it's going, it won't make any progress whatsoever. Let me put it differently. We are not really creatures of circumstance. We are creators of circumstance. And the future of Israel internally is up to all of us to help shape and create. When I lived in Israel and was privileged to represent my rabbinic class in dedicating the library building at the Hebrew Union College, nearly 40 years ago, the celebrated Amos Oz concluded his address with these questions so relevant for today. Listen, he asked 40 years ago, how shall we in Israel remain alive and not die? How shall we save Israel from the danger of physical destruction, from the threat of spiritual and moral disintegration inside our little country? I tell you, he continued, before there will be peace, we will have to raise the humanity within us from the dirt. We will have to lift Judaism and Zionism out of the dirt. For Judaism and Zionism have nearly fallen into the hands of those who are destroying them right here. He said much more, including this brief excerpt regarding the Palestinian-Israeli conflict. Quote, the principal historical blame rests on the shoulders of Palestinian leadership and its supporters in the Arab states and beyond. This fanatical movement has drowned all of us, Jews and Arabs alike, in year after year of blood and mud, he proclaimed. However, this is not two tragedies, Israeli and Palestinian, but one tragedy in which all of us are caught up. So either we get out of it together as a result of a sensible, even if painful, compromise, he pleaded, or we'll all die together because of it. The mosaic wall in front of you is inlaid with thousands of stones. Each and every Jewish person and household is like one of those gemstones in the larger mosaic of the Jewish people, from Memphis to Jerusalem. Or as Rabbi Jonathan Sachs put it, each of us is like a letter in the Torah scroll, and each of us is the author of our own letter, and each letter is essential to the entire scroll. Internally, the Jewish state is literally up for grabs between two Israels. One, emphasizing modern progress, a peaceful, prosperous future, a Jewish democratic state alongside a future separate entity for 5 million non-Israeli Arabs. The other Israel, unwittingly enabled by many in America, a fundamentalist, isolationist, messianic, ethno-nationalist, Jewish Armageddon crusade of darkness. The difference is that stark. For the sake of a world that needs Israel, and for the sake of an Israel that needs the world, claim your gemstone and help Israelis, help mainstream Israelis build the internal mosaic that reflects the attributes of the divine, the way you live your Judaism and your life. Claim your gemstone and help Israel build the mosaic that reflects your Jewish values, even and especially as we continue to defend her borders. In 1878, 70 years before Israel came into existence, the Jewish poet Naftali Herz Imber reflected on the Jewish people's 2,000-year-old yearning to live freely in our spiritual homeland. Please rise as we sing his words with Happy and Deb. כן יהי רצון, so may it be. Amen.